This woman knocks on a man's door. As soon as it opens, she kisses him and says that she is the true love he has been searching for. But suddenly, bang, someone strikes he dead, and they proceed to loot the man's belongings. Before he eyes closed for the last time, he sees the woman and the man making out. If there's another life, I will stop being a slave to love. At that moment, Han Feng sees a golden light that feels incredibly warm. Han Feng thought it was the way to heaven and immediately reached out for the light ahead. However, as soon as Han Feng touched it, he felt an excruciating pain. Han Feng screamed at the top of his lungs, and suddenly, he woke up in his room. Han Feng checked the date and confirmed that he had returned 15 days before the ice disaster. But one thing troubled Han Feng since he came back: the red light that would not leave his hand. When Han Feng sneezed by accident, the light turned green and glowed brightly, then shrank back by itself. The more Han Feng stared at it, the sleepier he felt. Then Han Feng remembered the Manhwa story about chi energy. He tried to channel the light into a weapon, Ban Kai, but nothing happened. Hearing his growling stomach, Han Feng saw a jar of peanuts, the last snack he had before the ice disaster began. When Han Feng tried to eat the peanuts with his green-colored hand, suddenly the peanuts grew into a plant. At the same time, the green light on his hand vanished. Han Feng was confused by the power he now had. But there was something more important than that. Hoarding supplies before the ice disaster began. Han Feng decided to go out to gather supplies. In the midst of his confusion about his powers, someone called out to him from behind. It felt like fate when he crossed paths with Han Feng, and that person was Li Huna, the mastermind who killed him in his previous life. Seeing Li Huna, Han Feng immediately became angry, but he tried to hold back because it wasn't the right time for revenge. Li Huna approached Han Feng, who had been in a daze. Han Feng then made an excuse, saying that he was just mesmerized by Li Huna's beauty. Hearing that, a proud smile appeared on the woman's lips. She then invited Han Feng to go shopping together, but Han Feng, already knowing he would just be taken advantage of, refused her invitation. Hearing the rejection from one of her love slaves, Li Huna went silent, frozen in place. The Waldemart supermarket was the largest and most complete in the city, but strangely, when the Ice Age hit, the place became empty overnight, without anyone knowing who was behind it. Inside the supermarket, Han Feng gathered food and tools that might be necessary for survival. The problem right now was that Han Feng's savings were quite low, but suddenly he received a notification that his loan had been approved. That's when Han Feng got a brilliant idea. He applied for loans from all the lending apps. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Li Huna was still upset over the previous rejection. Only a poor person who doesn't even have a car would dare reject my invitation, she thought. Just then, a car came from behind Li Huna, and it turned out to be Han Feng with his new car. Han Feng then said that his father's business in America was doing very well, and that his father had just sent him money. Seeing this, Li Huna immediately switched to her acting mode. With tears in her eyes, Li Huna said that Han Feng had been so cold before. Seeing Li Huna's act, Han Feng didn't want to lose, and said that Li Huna was someone special to him. Li Huna then suggested they go watch a movie and have dinner together to get to know Han Feng better. But when Li Huna opened her eyes, Han Feng was no longer in front of her. Han Feng was now busy with his shopping items, thus rejecting Li Huna's suggestion. Even so, Han Feng said he had a gift. Li Huna, thinking that Han Feng had already fallen into her hands, left with a victorious smile. Meanwhile, Han Feng also walked away with a sly smile. "This is my ticket to survive hell. Just wait. When the world ends, I'll get what I deserve for you, for him, and for you too." For half a month, Han Feng gathered all the necessities. For the sensitive items, he moved them himself to avoid suspicion from the neighbors. Han Feng had gathered everything from food and fuel to modifying rooms. Now, only one day was left before the ice disaster began. The temperature would gradually drop until it reached a low of minus 70 degrees Celsius. In the coming disaster, the supplies Han Feng had gathered would not be enough, so he tried to utilize the power in his hand, although he still didn't know how to activate it. Right now, in front of Han Feng, there was a plate of peanuts that he had grown himself using his powers. Han Feng was about to test whether the peanuts were safe to eat. Fortunately, the peanuts were safe to consume. Next, Han Feng tried to grow other plants. However, using his power too often caused both his mind and body to become exhausted. After trying several different plants, the results varied. Some could be grown, while others exploded. Strangely, the plants that exploded turned into something like lightweight coal. Despite trying numerous times, Han Feng couldn't find any specific pattern on how to activate or deactivate his power until he tried focusing his mind. He imagined himself merging with nature, and sure enough, the green light appeared in his hand. After successfully figuring that out, Han Feng tried the same thing with his meat supply. But nothing happened. Han Feng only felt a red aura when he touched the meat. So, Han Feng tried switching the green light with the red one. Suddenly, the meat in his hand changed. Han Feng, startled, immediately threw the meat away. When he checked it, the meat was fully cooked. Still unsure whether the red light's function was just to cook meat, Han Feng tried something else. He combined the green light, which held the peanuts, with the red light, which held the meat, and suddenly the meat doubled in size. Seeing this, Han Feng became even more excited and tried to make other things grow. However, everything else failed completely. After deciding to take a break, Han Feng suddenly remembered that he didn't have anything to defend himself with. Meanwhile, outside, the snow began to fall slowly. As Han Feng walked outside, thinking about how to get a weapon, he vaguely heard the sound of someone showing off. Han Feng felt like he had seen that person before by the extravagant style of their clothes. People there often called him Brother Li. He was the type of person who liked to flaunt wealth and luxury, but didn't actually have a proper job. He just acted busy in front of everyone. Han Feng, who lived in the same neighborhood as Brother Li, decided to greet him and whispered about what he needed. Hearing that, Brother Li was immediately shocked and warned him that although he had connections with people who sold weapons, buying and selling weapons was illegal. However, Han Feng didn't give up and tried to use his wit. He made up a story about a man who spit carelessly and got his face covered in spit. And when Han Feng scolded the man deliberately spat on him again. Eventually, Han Feng ended up beating the man, but the next day the man brought a group of people to beat up Han Feng. I've never been treated like that before. That's why I need a weapon to defend myself. Hearing that story, Brother Li immediately got angry and cursed the man who spat in Han Feng's face. Finally, he agreed to help Han Feng by introducing him to someone. Let's take the bus. If my Porsche isn't in for service, I'll drive you there, Brother Li said with great flair. Hearing that, Han Feng immediately started his car with the smart key. Let's just take my car. In the car, Brother Li enjoyed taking selfies and posting them on his social media. This new SUV is still too hard to sit in, he said. Ugh, his style is just like it's his own car, Han Feng thought. Long story short, they finally arrived at their destination. Brother Li, as the intermediary, said that his little brother wanted a pistol. Boss Liu, who was irritated, immediately threw a pistol on the table. Seeing this, Han Feng revealed his true intent. He wanted a long weapon with a scope. Boss Liu, knowing what he meant was a sniper rifle, immediately cursed Han Feng and told him that this place was not a shopping mall. Brother Li quickly tried to calm his boss down and started telling a sad story, similar to the one Han Feng had told earlier, but with a different version. Upon hearing the story, Boss Liu got angry and promised to fulfill Han Feng's request, although it would take some time. As a bonus, he also gave Han Feng a pistol. Seeing Boss Liu's sincerity, Han Feng told him about the extreme weather that was about to happen and suggested that they start stockpiling supplies before it was too late. And as they were about to leave, Han Feng, who had been lost in thought about his powers, suddenly slipped and fell, which led to him being rushed to the hospital. Han Feng, who had broken a bone, now had to stay at the hospital for an hour, and all of that happened just before the end of the world arrived. As he looked around the hospital, Han Feng noticed that the place was filled with accident victims from the snowstorm. Even emergency beds lined the hospital corridors. As Han Feng continued to look around, his gaze landed on one of the nurses. He became mesmerized by her beauty. Unfortunately, the nurse was too innocent, to the point where the old man next to her called out to her. When the nurse came over, the old man pretended that his back was hurting again, unknowingly taking pictures of the nurse's lower half. And it didn't stop there. The old man then started flirting with the nurse until a stick flew toward him, causing the perverted old man to fall. Han Feng, feeling awkward, immediately apologized for his clumsiness, explaining that it was the first time he used a cane. When he picked up the old man's phone, as he had suspected, he warned the old man to leave before he called the authorities. Of course, Han Feng wasn't going to return the phone, and the old man quickly fled. The nurse, still unaware of the old man's lecherous behavior, was shown the photo the old man had taken earlier. She was instantly shocked. As a thank you, the nurse helped Han Feng with his injured leg by wrapping a bandage around it. She also told him that he should come back in a week to check on his ankle. I don't think I'll be able to meet her again, Han Feng thought to himself. The next day, a news broadcast announced that heavy snowfall and extreme temperature drops would hit the entire country, even Egypt. The news anchor added that meteorologists stated it wouldn't last long and urged people not to panic or hoard supplies because the disaster would pass soon. Han Feng, hearing this, could only sigh. On the other hand, he felt calm because all his supplies were prepared, including securing his house. His neighborhood's chat group also started buzzing with discussions about the news Han Feng had just watched. Suddenly, an account named Mysterious Person sent a message telling everyone to prepare for a new world. The message also mentioned that the Ice Age apocalypse was about to begin. Han Feng, upon seeing this, was shocked by the message from Mysterious Person. People in the online group kept protesting against the property management because the accumulated snow outside had not been cleared. They complained about their dwindling supplies, fearing they wouldn't be able to go out and buy more. Meanwhile, the management couldn't do much either due to the extreme cold. Eventually, a man named Jiang urged everyone to stop blaming each other and take action. He encouraged them to clear the snow together. While some refused, many others agreed with Jiang's proposal. Han Feng, who had left the group chat, suddenly received a message from Huna. She asked about his whereabouts and subtly tried to take advantage of him by asking him to buy her food. She even sent a seductive photo to persuade him. Disgusted, Han Feng immediately stomped on the image on his phone. It had been 3 days since the snow started falling. The temperature outside had dropped to minus 20 degrees Celsius, but they still had internet access. People spent their time at home watching videos. Han Feng was no exception. he had been watching dancing girl videos. He realized that aside from food, keeping himself entertained was equally important, especially since he had an injured leg. While watching videos, Feng accidentally came across a clip of a doctor treating a patient who had jumped from a building. A sudden idea popped into his mind. He tried using the green light in his hand to heal his leg, but nothing happened. Not long after, Feng fell asleep. In his dream, he was riding a sheep while birds with sheep heads flew above him. Suddenly, he fell off and accidentally hurt his leg. A small sheep approached and licked his wound. When Feng reached out to pet it, the sheep glared at him angrily, then wrapped his injured leg with its tongue, emitting a green light. Feng woke up with a scream, only to see a green light glowing from his injured leg. When he removed the bandage, his wound had completely healed. Could it be that the green light healed me in my sleep? Still curious, he took a knife and cut his hand. The moment he activated the green light in his palm, his wound instantly vanished. Meanwhile, outside, people were working together to clear the snow. Jiang Shuiyu was among them, cheering everyone on. Uncle Liu spoke with Jiang, mentioning a young man who had bought large amounts of supplies, as if he were moving houses, just days before the disaster struck. It was as if he had been preparing for a long winter. Jiang tried to stay optimistic, saying the guy might have just been relocating. But Uncle Liu brought up something else. He had also seen gasoline tanks and a fireplace. It didn't make sense for someone who had just moved in to prepare all that. As the Jin twins reported that they had finished clearing the main road, a man suddenly appeared behind them. A moment later, the man, Wu Kuanyu, was hit by a snowball thrown by Liu Yan and fell to the ground. As they bickered, Jiang Shuiyu reminded them not to fight and to get ready to go to the supermarket for supplies. Uncle Liu once again asked Jiang Shuiyu what he thought of the situation. Jiang simply responded that this was just an ordinary snowstorm and that everything would return to normal soon. But if someone really has all those supplies, isn't that a good thing for us? Uncle Liu laughed and agreed. Then, they prepared to head to the supermarket. Meanwhile, a warm light glowed from one of the rooms. It was Feng's place. He was sleeping soundly, surrounded by an abundance of food and drinks. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. His weapon order had finally arrived. Brother Li personally delivered it to his doorstep. He also thanked Feng because, thanks to his warning, they had managed to stockpile enough food. He also shared some shocking news. The largest supermarket in their district had been emptied overnight. Feng was stunned. After Brother Li left, Feng couldn't help but wonder, how could they empty out an entire supermarket in just one night? If this were a comic, there would be someone with the ability to transport things into another dimension? Could someone like that exist here too? After all, Feng himself possessed an inexplicable power. Determined to understand his abilities, he began experimenting. However, he wasn't always successful in using his powers. Only 1 out of 10 beans sprouted, and all his attempts at transforming canned meat failed. After many tries, Feng experienced repeated failures. But in the end, he finally had some success. The more he thought about it, the more familiar the energy flow felt. It was just like the rhythm game that had been popular in the past. When Feng tried matching the tempo, the bean immediately sprouted successfully. Next, he applied the same theory to meat. But unlike beans, which turned into stone when the experiment failed meat would turn into a disgusting black liquid. Feng carefully attempted to merge meat and beans, following the rhythm precisely. But suddenly, the black liquid splattered all over his face. After countless failures, only one piece of meat remained. Concentrating, he tried again. This time, the meat doubled in size. Now, Feng understood how to use his ability properly, but he was too exhausted to continue experimenting. On the 3rd day of the blizzard, the government announced that due to the worsening conditions, power and network services would experience some disruptions. After this announcement, the group chat of the apartment residence where Feng lived was immediately filled with protests. As panic spread, Uncle Liu spoke up, telling everyone not to believe the news so easily. He argued that if everything was truly under control, they would have already received aid. He also shared information from a friend about armored vehicles and tanks moving toward the city. This could only mean one thing: war was about to begin. Hearing this, Jiang Shuiyu also stepped in. If what Uncle Liu said was true, then they needed to start helping each other, as many residents were already running low on food due to the lack of information. Jiang Shuiyu even offered to donate half of his food supplies, inviting those in need to come to him. Despite this, some residents hesitated. Wu Kuanyu supported Jiang Shuiyu's proposal and asked for Li Huna's opinion. Caught off guard by the question in a public chat, Huna grumbled but quickly found a way to avoid responsibility. She claimed that she also didn't have enough supplies, and as expected, her devoted followers quickly defended her. Despite this, many residents stepped forward to participate. In the end, Jiang Shuiyu decided to form a temporary emergency committee to distribute aid. He took the role of leader and appointed several people to assist him. Feng, who had only been observing, immediately recalled something about these so-called committees. He knew that, in reality, they were only looking for a way to seize supplies from others. On the 5th day, the temperature had now dropped to minus 40 degrees Celsius. The snow was getting thicker, and almost all heating systems had broken down. Even under blankets and in front of fireplaces, people were still shivering from the cold. Meanwhile, Feng was busy killing zombies in his game, enjoying his abundant food supply and a warm room. Suddenly, he received a call to join the efforts to clear the snow outside. Annoyed but not wanting to draw suspicion or conflict with his neighbors, Feng reluctantly joined the snow-clearing efforts. When they reached the lobby, they saw that the snow had piled up almost to the height of the door. Feng and several other men tried to force the door open. As soon as they succeeded, a gust of freezing wind rushed in. Just as everyone was starting to despair, Li Ziai suddenly appeared, mocking those who were shivering from the cold. With a deep breath, he dramatically attempted to break through the snow with brute force. But a moment later, they heard him screaming for help. People quickly pulled him back inside, revealing Li Ziyi, nearly frozen to death. They hurriedly shut the door again. Feng provided first aid to Brother Li and suggested they go to the parking lot to check in for attendance, as this blizzard was not something humans could simply deal with. In the parking lot, Jiang Shuiyu reassured everyone and said they should wait for the blizzard to subside before trying to clear the snow again. He also thanked those who had contributed donations. Hearing this, the gathered residents became more optimistic, believing they could get through this, but Feng, knowing the harsh reality, remained silent. At that moment, Feng spotted the nurse who had helped him before, Jin Shui. As she nearly slipped, Feng instinctively caught her. For a moment, their eyes met. When Jin Shui realized it was Feng, she immediately asked about his leg. Feng quickly made up an excuse, saying that he had always had a fast recovery rate since childhood. The naturally gullible nurse believed him without question. Long story short, Feng helped her carry medical supplies, and during their conversation, they got to know each other better. At that moment, Li Hyuna, standing behind Feng, suddenly called out to him and began flirting. Seeing this, Jin Jue quickly stepped away, not wanting to interrupt them. Li Hyuna then asked about Feng's food supplies and requested that he share some with her. Hearing such a request from someone who had once betrayed him, Feng, with a cunning intent, decided to tease her instead. He told her that he would give her some leftover food if she agreed to stay in his room for a few days. Li Hyuna, who only wanted to take advantage of Feng, quickly made an excuse. If you just want to chat, we can do it online. Hearing this, Feng turned and walked away. But, with her food supply completely depleted, Li Hyuna refused to give up on manipulating her target. She claimed that her feelings for Feng were sincere, and that she didn't want anyone to think she was only using him. With a sorrowful expression, she asked for time to consider Feng's offer. Upon hearing this, Feng appeared happy. But deep inside, he was disgusted by her pathetic act. After thinking about it, he realized he didn't need to seek out Li Hyuna for revenge. He simply needed to sit back, enjoy his food, and wait for her to come crawling to him, likely with the very guy who had once beaten him to death. Feng then promised that he would send some food to Li Hyuna's place tomorrow. Hearing this, Hyuna quickly walked away, a sly smile forming on her lips as if she had just ensnared her prey. Watching her leave, Feng simply smirked. After 2 days, the temperature outside had become even colder. It was so freezing that even the walls and windows had started to ice over. Li Hyuna's messages kept flooding Feng's phone, demanding the food he had promised her 2 days ago. Feng, who was enjoying his meal, completely ignored her messages. Meanwhile, Hyuna looked frustrated and starving. After countless experiments, Feng was now sure of 2 things. First, meat couldn't be expanded endlessly, and second, just like soybeans, meat could be reproduced indefinitely. So, from one soybean plant, Feng would use half for reproduction and the other half to eat. He planned to do the same with meat. With this method, Feng no longer had to worry about his food supply. Meanwhile, the news was reporting on an island completely covered in snow, with even the sea frozen solid. The ice was reportedly 55 centimeters thick, and temperatures had dropped to minus 42 degrees Celsius. Watching the news, Feng could only mutter that the reality was far worse than what was being reported. Just then, a sudden explosion occurred outside, the 7th one in just a few days. From his apartment window, Feng watched the explosion unfold, and was soon startled by the appearance of several helicopters flying in. The chaos outside had clearly reached a new level, and panic was now spreading among the apartment residents. Some people started bartering for basic needs, while others tried to scam their way through, which only led to more commotion. It was at that moment that Jiang Shuiyu arrived, bringing food to share with the residents. Feng was forced to head out and observe the situation. In his previous life, this place had been the center of an uprising triggered by the emergency committee's betrayal when they stole supplies from the residents. But now, instead of stealing from the people, the committee was handing out food for free. Feng rushed to find out what was really going on. At the food line, an old man was complaining about receiving too little. He even demanded that the food he had previously donated be returned to him, claiming it was unfair. Jiang Shuiyu calmly told him that it wasn't possible. Hearing that, the man started yelling, which angered the people waiting behind him. They scolded him, saying he had no shame for demanding his donation back, and told him not to make things harder for Jiang Shuiyu, who was only trying to help. Feng watched the commotion from afar, clearly amused. "Shameless," he muttered. Brother Li, who had also been watching, commented on the situation and then greeted Feng. They exchanged pleasantries, but soon Brother Li's stomach let out a loud growl. Looking frail and skinny, Brother Li admitted he had donated all his food to the committee, and now his supplies were gone, even before the blizzard had passed. He complained that the rations given out were so small, he had to drink excessive amounts of water just to suppress his hunger. Feeling sorry for his old friend, Han Feng offered him 4 packs of instant noodles and 2 sausages. But in exchange, Brother Li had to do something. Upon hearing this, Li Zi was grateful and told Han Feng to leave the small task to him. Just like that, Han Feng had completed an intel gathering mission in exchange for a bit of food. Just as he was about to leave, someone called out to Han Feng, and suddenly a slap landed on his cheek. "You've really disappointed me." It was Huna scolding Han Feng in front of everyone for not replying to her messages. He was stunned by her sudden outburst. Before he even had the chance to get his revenge, she was already playing games with him again. As Huna continued to lash out, Han Feng remained silent, trying to keep his cool. Then, deciding to turn the tables, he apologized and made up a story. He claimed that the supplies he had set aside for her were stolen after he left them outside her door. Hearing that, Huna asked if he still had any food left to give her. "Not much, maybe just enough to last a few days if I eat 1 piece of meat per day." The moment she heard the word meat, her face lit up with joy. She told Han Feng to give her half of it. Han Feng couldn't believe what he was hearing, but once again, he held back and said he would split the meat evenly with Li Huna. Delighted, Li Huna told him to hurry home so he wouldn't catch a cold, then turned and walked away. That night, Li Huna texted and called Han Feng multiple times, but got no reply. Since the elevator was out of service, she had no choice but to climb the stairs to his place. Halfway up, the emergency lights suddenly went out, and she heard footsteps approaching. As she looked up, a large package came crashing down on her head, and just as quickly, the lights flickered back on. Turns out, it was a big bag of flour. The culprit, Han Feng. Seeing Huna now covered in flour, Han Feng quickly apologized, claiming he had overslept and rushed down in a panic. He said that when he saw her messages and was coming downstairs, the lights went out, and he accidentally dropped the flour bag. Huna was furious, brushing flour off her clothes in frustration. Little did she know, that was all part of Han Feng's plan to get back at her. After that, Han Feng gave Huna the food he had promised. Leftovers he had purposely collected for her. Huna looked at it with disgust, but when Han Feng tried to take it back, she stopped him. "Who said I didn't want it?" That made Han Feng feel grossed out. The goddess he once chased after in his past life turned out to be this shameless. He watched her walk away with a bag of garbage food and flour in her hands. "That should be enough to give her a stomachache for a few days," he muttered. "You can't even take a proper shower in this weather, so just leave the flour on your body for now." As he walked off, Han Feng felt like someone was following him. He kept walking, then quickly hid and waited for the person to pass. The moment he grabbed them and was about to strike, he realized it was a girl wearing glasses. Han Feng asked why she had been spying on him, but the girl didn't say a word. Getting irritated, Han Feng threatened to rip up her clothes if she kept silent. But again, she didn't flinch, not even a single movement. Weirded out by the whole thing, Han Feng decided to walk away. But then, the girl grabbed his arm and tried to pull him somewhere. When they reached her room, Han Feng was stunned. The place was packed with supplies. It turned out that this girl had been doing her own calculations and analysis about the coming ice age. She was also the one behind the mysterious account Person that had warned everyone in the group chat. Han Feng asked why she was showing him all this. The girl then pulled up CCTV footage, showing Han Feng buying all his supplies. That shocked him. She had been watching him this whole time, and when he turned to look at the girl beside him, he was even more shocked to see her start undressing. Han Feng quickly scolded her and told her to put her clothes back on. The reason she had been spying on him was because she suspected that he had been stockpiling supplies for the Ice Age. Suddenly, the girl got closer and grabbed something, making Han Feng visibly nervous. The real reason she brought him to her room was because she wanted him to teach her how to start a generator. So, Han Feng taught her how to use the generator, how to get hot water, how to store meat in the fridge, and how to install a gas canister. In the end, Han Feng even ended up cooking for her. He couldn't help but complain about how terrible she was at taking care of herself. But the girl, completely unfazed, just kept chewing her food while he talked. She even fell asleep mid-bite. Seeing that, Han Feng sighed and covered her with a blanket before quietly leaving. This feels like having a child. The next day, the girl showed up at Han Feng's place with a few things she wanted to give him, but in reality, she just came to ask how to use the generator. Again. After a few days of teaching her, Han Feng was now convinced. This girl wasn't the brightest. She didn't even know the most basic things, especially when it came to cooking. Still, she had made a bit of progress compared to when they first met. That's when Han Feng realized he didn't even know her name. When he asked her, she replied, "True Eye of the Evil King." Han Feng stared blankly for a moment, then said, "Let's just pretend I never asked." Meanwhile, in another part of the building, chaos had erupted as people fought over supplies. A full-blown brawl broke out. In the middle of the mess, Jiang Shuiyu showed up and tried to calm everyone down. But the crowd started blaming him instead. After all, it was his idea to have everyone donate their food. And now, they were all running out. But, cunning as ever, Jiang Shuiyu deflected the blame. He said it wasn't anyone's fault, not theirs, and not his. "The real culprits are the ones who refuse to donate. That's why we're in this mess," he said. Fueled by his words, the crowd completely lost their rationality and actually started to agree with him. Li Ziyi, who witnessed the whole thing, panicked and rushed to tell Han Feng about the situation. Upon hearing this, Han Feng immediately went on high alert. He began preparing his defenses. Sure, he had 2 weapons for self-defense, but if a group launched a coordinated attack, he'd be overwhelmed. And if people ever found out he had a stash of supplies, he'd get mobbed. Right then, the power went out, and the signal disappeared along with it. People panicked even more and demanded that someone contact the building management. But management had already been unreachable for some time. Considering how much electricity had been used for heating, this was only a matter of time. Han Feng continued prepping everything he needed for defense. With the snowstorm raging outside, keeping rooms warm had become even more difficult. The power and signal outage. It wasn't coming back. It was permanent. And once people realized that, that's when true hell would begin. 30 minutes earlier, Huna was seen enjoying a warm bowl of noodles in a rich man's home. After announcing in the group chat that she'd buy supplies at 50 times the original price, the chat went silent. The rich man turned to Huna and asked if she now saw that following him was the right choice. "As long as I have the supplies, I can do whatever I want with you," he said. Just then, there were loud noises coming from outside. Someone outside shouted that this was the right place. They had seen people carrying loads of supplies from here. Another voice urged them to bring tools and break open the door. When it finally opened, a group of people stood there, armed. Elsewhere, Han Feng was trying to install an electric shock trap on his door, but was struggling with it. Suddenly, there was a knock. He peeked through the peephole and saw the same girl he had met earlier, standing quietly outside. But before opening the door, Han Feng suddenly recalled the time he opened the door for Li Huna and ended up getting killed. He told the girl to leave, saying that looters were going around raiding other residents' apartments. But the girl just stood there, silently. Then, footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Multiple people were heading to Han Feng's floor. The raiders had arrived. By the time they reached his floor, the strange girl was nowhere to be seen. Turns out, Han Feng had brought her inside. He told her to stay calm and reassured her that his door was reinforced. Sure enough, when the looters tried to break in, the door didn't budge at all, not even the handle. Eventually, they gave up and moved on to the next unit, but not before marking Han Feng's door. After they left, Han Feng gave the electric trap another shot, but failed again. Seeing this, the girl showed him how to install it properly, and it worked. Han Feng asked her how she knew how to do that. "True eye of the evil king." Han Feng couldn't help but chuckle at the answer. Then he asked why she had come looking for him again, but instead of answering, she began unpacking her stuff and casually announced that she'd be living there now. Han Feng was shocked. He told her to leave, but just as he said that, he tripped on a cable and fell straight into a wooden table. Expecting to feel pain, Han Feng was surprised when he didn't feel anything at all. The table had gone soft. His hands were now glowing with a purple light. And not just the table. Even his toolbox and everything inside had turned soft as well. Then, Han Feng remembered, he wasn't alone. He turned and saw the little girl watching him. She had seen everything. This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.